Excellent. Well, let's dive into things. So once again, welcome to this month's virtual Shopify Meetup for Portland, Oregon. And I'm your very special guest host. I'm Kai Davis, founder of Double Your E-commerce, and I'll be sitting in for Alana Davis today while she shares a fabulous presentation with us. In terms of the agenda, folks are, we're still seeing folks trickle in and arrive, and we're going into the welcome right now. We'll be starting Alana's presentation in just a minute or two. And just in case anybody out there is worried, this session is being recorded. So assuming everything works today, which knock wood again, we'll be sharing the video with you in the next day or so. So you could just rewatch this, share it with friends, extract all those relevant tidbits. And we most likely will take the full time today. So we're just going to keep on going. A word of love for our sponsors. First, Jason LD for SEO transforms your SEO with rich results, a program that allows you to show search enhancements such as review stars, price, and availability in Google Search, Bing, Pinterest, and other search engines. And thanks to our other sponsor, Shopify, Shopify is more than just an e-commerce solution. Sell anywhere to anyone with Shopify's e-commerce platform and point of sale features. And before we dive into it, just a quick note on upcoming events. April 26th, Alana will be having a special guest on to talk about 9 ways to write higher converting copy without sounding sleazy. I tell you, you're going to want to attend that presentation. It's going to be high value and give you a bunch of actionable information. And so now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Alana Davis, who many of you might know as the regular host of this virtual Shopify Meetup. Alana is the owner of Jason LD for SEO, and she's going to chat with us today about a very cool strategy to increase organic traffic without fighting for rankings. If that makes your head explode, it should, because it's amazing. Hi, Alana. I'll turn things over to you now.
Hello. Thank you. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. All right. So yes, as Kai said, I typically am the host of the meetup, and I was so grateful when Kai offered to host this time for me. So thank you so much. So yeah, as he said, I run Jason LD for SEO, which is a Shopify app that gets you more organic traffic through rich results. And this session today is basically our findings of what we've learned over the last few years. So I may talk about the app as a possible solution, but know that you can be successful without an app. Some themes may have some of what you need to qualify for these search enhancements, but if you know how to code, you can certainly code it yourself. But I'm going to go on the assumption that most of you are not coders. So hopefully this will be some valuable tips for you today. Also, as Kai said, it is being recorded and we will share this video afterwards. There is a ton of information that I'm going to be covering today, so don't feel like you have to take notes because it can be hard to wrap your mind around it in some spaces because the stuff that we're going to cover is semi-technical, but I'm trying to make it not hard to process. So if you have questions, please let me know. I'm happy to address them at the end. I will also be sharing my contact information for you, and you can certainly email me as well. All right. So search enhancements are features that improve the look of a search results. And know that there are a lot of different types of search enhancements that search engines, such as Google will actually use, but not all of those are going to apply to Shopify stores. So we're going to focus on the most common search enhancements that you can qualify for with Shopify. Now, SEO is really competitive and can be really challenging to outrank your competitors. But with search enhancements, you can transform your SEO by showing the information that customers care about in search results. With more information showing than your competitors, you can improve your click-through rates, even with your lower rankings, that's totally fine. And then because you've got more information and more details in the search results, your traffic is already qualified, meaning they know the price, your reviews, and if it's in stock before they even land on your site. And this, of course, in turn, boosts up your conversion rate. So it all really helps you to be that authority on search results already. Now, Google has the the most popular search engine. We all know that. So I'm going to use Google's terms for the most part. But there are a lot of different types of search enhancements, and their naming conventions can be bonkers. It can be really difficult to process. So the best advice that I can give is don't worry about it. You don't have to understand what it's called, nor should you spend countless hours trying to obtain one type of search enhancement over another. For the sake of time, I'm only going to cover search enhancements that we can actually influence, because some of those search enhancements, they're beyond our control. We can't really do anything with it because it's all based on their algorithm. Either way, the type of search enhancement awarded is still up to Google's algorithm, even if we can influence the information that's provided. Because we can provide as much information as possible, but it's all up to Google in the end on what exactly is shown and where it's shown. You also might hear me use the term rich results throughout this presentation, which is often used interchangeably with the term search enhancements. So if I do confuse you, I apologize. I'm not trying to. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some real life examples. Google has a knowledge panel that shares information about an organization. This is compiled from all of the information that Google has in their database. So it's often more likely than not on larger companies that you'll see more details. For example, this one with Shopify, the knowledge panel for Shopify shows more specific information around their stock price, their revenue, founders, social profiles, and all that stuff. That's because all that information is publicly available. On the other hand, you have Animals Matter on the other side, who is a Shopify store that has buttons for their website and directions, as well as the reviews and address. You can also see a very simplified version of this for your store just by filling out Google My Business profile, but obviously a more complete knowledge panel is going to be your goal. This one right here is called Site Links, and it typically shows with your homepage, with your title and description on top, and then the top pages that Google deems important indented underneath it. You may also see sometimes there's going to be a search query, a little box in there to enter in a search query directly in this result, and that would be called a site link search box. It's pretty hard to obtain, but it is possible. The larger stores tend to have that. Then we have frequently asked questions. The frequently asked questions search enhancement is one that many stores can utilize, but I really don't think that they know exist. This is going to be different from the people also asked section that you may see. The FAQ rich result, this one right here that I'm showing, shows up when I searched for Animals Matter bed inserts washable, and it's highlighting the answer to my question along with what Google determined was an important FAQ that is included in the result underneath. Not as common on Shopify, but there are certainly a handful of stores who have recipes on their site. So you can qualify for recipe-rich results that can show up in Google search results and in Google image as either an individual recipe similar to what we're seeing here, or as a carousel. Then we have product search enhancements, which can include reviews, price range, availability, and brand. Now, many people have asked me if rich results are still worth investing in if you don't have reviews, and my answer is always yes, because you can still get other data to show up, like the price, availability, and on images too. All that stuff can show up in search results. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later too, but don't feel like you have to have reviews in order to get the benefits out of rich results. Also, if you're using Merchant Center, Google may now also show shipping details in the rich result because it connects the data that you have in your store with the data that you've got in Merchant Center. So they sort of help each other out. And then much like Google's product results, Bing also shows similar search enhancements, which they call information-rich search results. I feel like it's a tongue twister just for me to get some of these terminologies out. Bing is often the ugly stepsister of Google, but it's really worth investing in because many other search engines, such as DuckDuckGo, actually will utilize Microsoft Search Engine for their own results. And I also really like Bing because they show the brand on the regular search result, whereas Google only shows the brand on the image search result. Although I do expect at some point that Google may change and actually show the brand in the regular search, but time will tell. We'll see what they actually do with that. Pinterest is another one. They call their search enhancements rich pins. The first screenshot is what it looks like when you're browsing. You'll see the company name, logo, and the product title, but without the rich pin, that part below the image is usually just blank. And then when you open up the pin, as shown on the right side, you'll see the website URL, price range, product title, reviews, the visit link to the site, and then the product details, which in this one, it actually expands out to show you the full product description. And customers who use JSON-LD for SEO for their structured data search enhancements have shared these results with me. They've said, for example, Pool Store Canada said that they saw 40% more exposure within search results. Bailey CBD said that their Google search position doubled and their organic impressions and clicks increased upwards of 200%. And then Belly Bands was able to decrease their ads and Facebook ads by 70% since installing JSON-LD for SEO. So what I'm hoping is that at this point, you're all asking, how do we get these results too? And it's not some mystery. It's not some like magic that happens. There's all things that happen within the backside that you can actually help control with this. So we're going to talk about that. To qualify for search enhancements, you have to provide these explicit clues about the page, but you can't just add the information to the page all willy-nilly. By structuring the information in a way that Google can better understand what's on the page, they then know how to share that information within their search results. And to do this, you use what's called structured data. The structured data connects each piece of the information so that it's clear what data matches up with what using the schema.org vocabulary. Think of this sort of like a matching game where we're playing like the matching games that you see for kids, where you're saying this title matches Pro Aqua Preme Hot Tub Steps in this example, and the price is $129.99, and the currency is in Canadian dollar. This is where some of you might be like, oh my gosh, she's showing me some code. Don't worry. I just wanted you to have a better idea of where this comes from. There's going to be 3 different types of formatting that you can use to add structured data. RDFA is rarely used, so I don't really want to spend time on this one. Just know that it's an option and that it utilizes HTML. Microdata also uses HTML, but it's much more common to see that in your Shopify theme. Up until recently, Shopify required all themes to include microdata, but have since moved towards the JSON-LD format. So many older Shopify themes who have migrated to JSON-LD still have that leftover microdata in their code. So you may see microdata spread throughout your templates because it's nested into different areas of the code, which makes it really hard to edit sometimes. JSON-LD is a format that came from the JavaScript world, and that puts all of your data in one place rather than spread throughout your theme. This is Google's preferred method to enter in the structured data. JSON-LD is the modern formatting for structured data, and it is the gold standard. So if you wanted to learn more about structured data, maybe you have a desire to learn more about this, you should learn about JSON-LD. Some people have said that you can also use Merchant Center to provide some of that information, as we talked about with the shipping details, but it's new and not 100% reliable yet. And Merchant Center often depends on your structured data in order to get ads. So it makes it really hard if you're only depending on Merchant Center to supply that information. They really have to work together. Some Shopify stores may not realize as well that there is that connection between Merchant Center and structured data. The crossover is that Merchant Center on the paid side and a landing page on the organic side is that Merchant Center will check your landing pages to make sure that they're legit. So they do this by matching that landing page with the data feed. And one part of that matching is checking the structured data for the product price, availability, URL, and product identifiers such as SKU, MPN, or GTIN. For those who don't know, MPN is the manufacturer's part number, and GTIN is the global trade item number. In Shopify, this is the equivalent to a barcode that is used to differentiate your products. Reviews in Merchant Center do not come from structured data. Reviews for ads they actually need to be sent from your review provider. So it's usually a separate feed from your regular Google data feed that you don't typically have control over. So there's a lot of different moving pieces when you're using Merchant Center as well. So there's going to be instances where you can't qualify for search enhancements. So let's talk about what those exclusions might be. First of all, if your store is password protected, that means Google cannot crawl your site. So not only can passwords impact your rich results, but it can impact your SEO as a whole. So I don't recommend turning on and off passwords unless you are able and willing to accept the risk that you're going to lose all of your traffic from Google. The other thing is that Google only wants you to mark up specific products with structured data and explicitly calls out not marking up category or a list of products. In Shopify terms, that's your collections. So for example, in Google's guidelines here, it says that shoes in our shop is not a specific product, meaning I cannot buy shoes in our shop, but I can buy this particular shoe. So it's different. You cannot win product search enhancements on collection pages, no matter what people might tell you. The other exclusion that can be a little iffy sometimes is adult-related products are not supported with rich results, but Google doesn't really define what adult products are, so it's kind of squishy. Some sexual products may or may not be allowed. For example, I've seen condoms and some toys that receive search enhancements, but it's inconsistent. Vapes, lingerie, and alcohol are definitely permitted though. And then finally, I've seen some SEO apps include more data, but more doesn't always equate to success. There are thousands of different combinations of schema that you could use. So it's important to understand what information Google actually cares about. So you can't just say, I have 20 fields completed, I must be good, because quality matters more than quantity. And all of that to say, don't let your attempt to have perfect structured data be the enemy of good enough. You can have all the possible fields that schema.org allows, but that isn't as good as the ones that Google will actually use. I've seen a lot of apps and stores want to add schema types solely because it exists and they think it's going to help them. For example, I've seen someone that have asked me to add the schema property for keywords, and then they'll actually enter their keywords in the data. Well, Google doesn't read the keywords field. That doesn't mean anything to them. But what you've done is actually help out your competitors, because now you've leaked your keywords so they know exactly what you're targeting. I've also seen internal tags or inventory count being leaked. So you want to be really careful about what information you're entering into these SEO apps, or at least know where that information that you've entered is going to be displayed. There are literally thousands of fields that schema.org supports, but Google only has 30 types of features, some of which are still in early testing, let alone the number of features that you can actually qualify for on e-commerce stores. Structured data has applications outside of SEO, which is why the majority of fields are ignored by search engines and don't actually impact your SEO. Also, having all of the possible fields that Google uses, well, that's not as good as having all of the fields Google uses and your code is stable. So working with a trusted developer or an app to provide that structured data is equally as important, because Google does make updates to their requirements. So you need to have that trusted partner who's keeping up on their changes as they come out. Okay, let's move into the things that can impact your search enhancements. First, we need to know if the data that we have is good enough. And to do this, there are two tools that I like to use. If you've looked at structured data in the past, you may remember the structured data testing tool from Google. They donated that tool to schema.org, and it's now called the Schema Markup Validator. I like this tool because it's fast and it tells me if the structured data itself is valid. It's rare for me to see any warnings on here. I usually only see when there's an error in the code because they're looking at whether or not the structured data, the code itself is valid, not whether or not Google wants it like that. That's why I also use Google's rich results testing tool. But this one takes a long time to load and I'm impatient. So the rich results testing tool shows me similar warnings and errors that you might find in your Google Search Console. So that's why it's nice to have them both. But Search Console is at best a few days behind. Both of these tools can show me at this very moment what my structured data looks like and if there are warnings or errors that I should be concerned about. They're both free and you don't need an account to use them. You can even use them on your competitors' websites if you really wanted to, if that's something you'd like to check out. Now let's talk a little bit about Search Console and Google's rich results testing tool labels. They label their search enhancements with error, valid with warnings, or valid. The error means that Google will not read that set of information in the structured data and that action is required from you. Valid with warnings means that Google can see it perfectly fine, but there may be some information you could add if you have it. And then valid, well, that means it's good. Let's talk about the valid with warnings a little bit. Valid with warnings is like a heads up. If you have the information, can you add it? If not, okay, cool. That's totally fine. There may not be any action that you have to take with valid with warnings because Google can read the information. Errors, those are the ones that you should be concerned about. When there's an error on a particular set of data, Google will ignore that whole set of data. For example, you have an error on your product's price because it's required, then Google will ignore that whole product data entirely, and you won't qualify for any search enhancement from that set. So when you see errors, it's a good idea to look into them, even if you have more than one set of data, because ideally we don't want to see any errors, but maybe it's not always that simple. So if you have an error, you're going to want to talk with your theme provider or talk with your developer to help you fix it. Now, Google search is smart though. If you have more than one set of structured data, Google will choose the most complete set of information. For example, this logo has 2 items detected. When you click on the logo, you're going to find that one of them is valid and the other has an error. As I mentioned, Google will ignore the set of data with the error and instead focus on the set that is valid or valid with warnings. So you could ignore this issue because you have one set of logo data that is good. Let's talk about some common warnings that we might see. The first is regarding reviews. So there are 2 different review fields that can be used, and both of these are optional. You should expect to see warnings for both the review and aggregate rating if you have no reviews on your product. Review companies don't always provide the structured data needed to qualify for search enhancements. Maybe that's because it's on a higher tier of their product offering, or they just don't know that it should be provided. But usually when a review provider does include the structured data for reviews, it's separate from the rest of your product data. And when they're separate pieces of information, you usually can get reviews or price and availability, but rarely all 3 of those, which you should be able to get. And that's one of the reasons why our app, JSON-LD for SEO, integrates with over 20 review providers. Now, if you have reviews, only the aggregate rating should be used. So you will still see that review field warning. The review field doesn't apply to Shopify products. It's for a critic review, which is where someone writes an article about maybe a business or a book or a movie. I want to expand on that a little bit because people don't often believe me. Let's say you send one of your products to an influencer to write up an unbiased review. So they write up a review on their website about your product, and they say it's 4.5 stars as shown in this result for the 7 best shower tile cleaners of 2022. That is a critic review. For product reviews, you should only use aggregate rating. The aggregate rating gathers all of the reviews for a particular product on your site, aggregates the ratings, and comes up with one final review rating. The risk of using the review field is that Google may show the reviewer's name and only show their rating instead of the aggregate of all of the reviews for that product. Okay, so then we have warnings for things like SKU and no global identifiers such as G10 or MPN. These warnings show up for 2 possible reasons. One, you haven't set up a SKU or a global identifier for your products. Or 2, your theme isn't showing the information in your structured data. If you have these set up in Shopify, make sure that you include them for all of your variants, not just the main product. If you're using Facebook, Google Merchant Center, or ads in general, you need to have the G10 or MPN, as those are going to be required fields. And if you're not using Facebook, Merchant Center, and don't want to add this SKU, G10 or MPN, then you can just ignore these warnings. It's fine. Because again, valid with warnings, Google will still see it and they will still give you the results that you do qualify for. Okay, so here's a few things that can positively affect your search enhancements. Having a moderate amount of text content on the page is really important. I usually recommend between 200 and 500 words of unique content, though more is always going to be better. Product reviews must be sourced directly from the customer. You can't manually add the testimonials you can't manually add testimonials on your products or your homepage. Those don't count towards the eligibility of a review snippet. That's why having a review app is so important for your search results. So if you do want to qualify for the review rich results, you need to get a review app if you don't have one. Having at least one error-free set of structured data per type. Again, as I've mentioned before, errors can block that set of data from being read completely. So having at least one error-free is really important. And then ensure that all of your possible variants and product options are listed both visually on the page and in the structured data. For example, a variant should have their own price, availability, product condition, all that stuff. All of that needs to be in the structured data as well. Even more specifically, each product and variant should have a unique URL in the structured data. Notice that the variant URL includes the question mark variant equals and then a number. This is incredibly important for Facebook and Merchant Center and a common cause for price mismatching errors within Merchant Center. And then finally, using JSON LD for your structured data, as this is the preferred method from search engines. There's going to also be a few negative factors that will slow things down for you. The first is missing structured data, such as having no FAQ data at all. That'll prevent you from qualifying for an FAQ-rich result. As I mentioned at the start of this, there may be some themes that have some of what you need for products because Shopify required themes to include that product data, but that may not be the case for other pages across your site. Changing your URL structure can cause you to start over on your SEO. This is most often seen with collections because Shopify uses collections / collection name / product title. So you'll want to be very careful when deleting products from a collection, or if your SEO expert wants to make changes to the canonical URLs. It probably couldn't hurt to occasionally run your pages through the schema markup validator or the rich results testing tool to make sure that these pages with the same content have the same structured data, because all 3 of these link to the exact same page. Fake reviews may make it past Google's bots, But if a human reviewer at Google determines the page is not compliant with their guidelines, you could be subject to a manual action from Google. In many cases, this could result in lower rankings or being removed from search results completely. Now, most people don't mean to do this, but combining reviews from another product because it's similar could get you into hot water. That's like creating fake reviews. If they're so similar, perhaps they should be variants of the product and not a standalone product. Site speed can definitely be a factor as well. If it takes a long time for the structured data to appear on the page, it may be too late for Google's bots, and Google has already moved on from your page. Now, there's going to be a few common misconceptions that I often hear from Shopify stores, usually directed at them from other SEO experts or from advice where the person just doesn't know enough about how structured data works. So I wanted to clear up some of this confusion. Google's definitions of errors and warnings can be really confusing. Errors in your data can make you lose search enhancements. Warnings will not prevent you from getting search enhancements unless the pieces that you're missing are important. For example, you won't miss out on the product search enhancements just because you don't have reviews. But if you don't have reviews, you cannot qualify for the review search enhancement. Duplicate structured data is different from duplicate content. Google doesn't care if you have duplicate sets of the same structured data on a page. They will detect all of the product data on a specific URL, analyze the data, and find the best and most relevant set of data to use. In this example, Google will ignore the first set of data because it is less complete than the second set of the product data. So they're going to use that second set. Product and review data belongs only on the product page. This is different from what is visually displayed on your collection. You can visually display reviews on your collections. That's okay. Google does not want to see product or review structured data on a collection page, and you cannot qualify for a product or review search enhancement on collections. Implementing a new theme or upgrading, if you're really far behind, can absolutely impact your search results, including search enhancements, because oftentimes these changes may include navigation menu updates, URL changes, and domain name changes, just to name a few. Okay, so we've covered a lot, and I want to make sure that you know what your next steps are. So here's your action items. Do a Google search and determine if search enhancements are showing for your site. I've included this Google shortcut so that you're only looking at your site's product pages. You can also evaluate your data by testing it either through the schema markup validator or rich results testing tool. Feel free to email me for your free audit as well. I'll be including some of these links for the testing tools in the recap and the video recording. And then if there are areas that need to be fixed and you feel comfortable with the code, give it a go. Otherwise, you're going to want to talk to your theme provider or install an app like JSON-LD for SEO. Okay, that was a lot of information, and I get it, but I think we have some time to do some search enhancement audits. So I'm going to ask you to share your links in the chat. If there's a specific product page that you want me to look at, send that over. It's best to look at a product with reviews and or variants. Otherwise, if you don't send me something and I randomly pick your store, I'm going to pick something at random, product at random. I'm going to only pick maybe 2 sites to look at so that we have time for questions. But you're going to see my process when folks email me asking for their free audit. And if I don't get to you today, please email me, support@alanadavis.com for your free audit.
We've got folks sharing product links in the chat. Want me to just send a couple across to you, Alana?
Let me see if I can open them up, actually. Oh, there we go. I'm going to grab someone. This is the first one I saw, so I have no idea what I'm looking at. Is it going to open? Okay. So I'm going to move this over because I already have some things popped up. Now, one thing I want you guys to remember, I just closed that pop-up that showed up, but Google would not actually interact with your page. So if this was the one that was sent to Google, if you were advertising or whatever, this is what Google sees. They don't actually interact with your page. But I'm going to copy and paste this, and I run both of these at the same time. So this is the rich results testing tool. And then this is the schema markup validator. And I run them both at the same time because they take a long time. So this one says there's an error validating your markup. I want to see if the other one pops up first. It could be, okay, so that one showed up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick a product and see if that makes a difference for you. Sometimes that error pops up solely because it's just a weird thing with the page. I'm going to try to view source and copy your code instead. Sorry if this is like, what is she doing? I'm not trying to confuse you. I just want to see if I can get it to show up. Yeah, there might be something going on with your markup. I'm not totally sure. Let's try this. So you do have markup. I'm not sure why it's not showing up, but I don't even remember who that was that I copied it because I literally just grabbed it. If you want to email me, I will do it separately so that we're not doing it and taking up other people's time. So email me. All right, I'm going to pick a different person. All right, so we're going to run this one through. I want to do a new test. Sometimes it's really hard to run these live because they can take a long time to load. Okay, now what this is telling me is there's something going on with the schema markup validator. So this may not actually be you. So instead, we're going to look at the rich results testing tool because this one is actually showing up for us. This is also why I run them both at the same time, because sometimes one of them is just having a day. So here we have breadcrumbs that's showing errors, and we have products, and we have review snippets. So I'm going to go ahead and open up these breadcrumbs just because we're going to talk about it briefly because I want you to be able to see them. But one thing that we didn't talk about is that breadcrumbs isn't nearly as important for structured data as they used to be because Google has sort of figured out how to show breadcrumbs naturally. So actually, JSON-LD for SEO doesn't even provide breadcrumb data because every theme is different in how they set up their structure of the URLs. And so we have just said, look, we're going to leave that to the themes themselves. But we have seen many people still qualify for results and not have breadcrumbs. So I'm not going to stress about it too much. But if I look at this, there's two different breadcrumbs. One of them is green, one of them is red. That means this one is valid. Google is going to ignore this one, but we're going to look at it anyways because we can see what the issues are. In this case, it says you're missing the position. So that is going to be, let me show you because I see some questions in here about what's a breadcrumb. This is a breadcrumb. Oh, I can't even see. Usually you would have up on top and it would say like your homepage, the collection, and then your product title, but it's not even showing up. That might be why you're struggling with it. What's happening? I can't even scroll, but I'm not seeing the breadcrumbs. This could be an issue with how it's being displayed to me. I'm not sure, but hopefully that helps you to know what a breadcrumb is. But it has to do with the field position. So that's like the order of what is being shown up. Okay, but I don't want to spend time on that because it's not super important. You already have one. Now we have products. So we have two different sets in here. We have one that only has 2 warnings and one that has 9. All right, so in this one, the 2 warnings, we're missing a field for review, which is fine. They shouldn't have a review. And we're missing price valid until. The price valid until is not actually a required field for rich results, but it's necessary for other areas within Google, such as Merchant Center. So this is one of those things where Google could very well require this in the future, but right now they don't. So it doesn't hurt you to have that as missing, but it's good to add it if you can. Everything else in here looks good. I'm not seeing anything else that jumps out at me. Let's look at this other one. So here we're missing the SKU, an image, aggregate rating, review, brand, G10. Lots of stuff is missing. This looks like it's probably from the theme data. So the best way to tell, best way to tell is what you can do is click on it, and on the right-hand side, it's going to show you where that piece of code is coming from. In this case, we can see how it says item prop. If you remember when I talked about the difference between microdata and JSON LD, this is microdata. It's nested within the HTML itself, as opposed to this one. If you look at it, it's got this script, this little script tag, and it has application LD plus JSON. That is JSON LD data. So that's why those two are going to be different. So in this case, you're not missing anything that's required for rich results. That would be fine. But I'm going to go back to this. But if you only had this, then I would say you're missing a ton of information. So that one looks okay for me right now. The other thing that I wanted to look at is this review snippet. If we open that one up, we see that you do show aggregate rating, but what we didn't see in this one with the 9, there was no aggregate rating, but in here, we did see it nested into this. So for this particular product, you could qualify for reviews within your product data. So that one looks good. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to pick another one because I want to make sure that we have time for some questions. And I can't see, Kai, if there's any like major questions in here.
Oh, we've got a bunch of great
Oh my
questions.
gosh. Okay. I'm going to do one more, and then we will answer some questions. Does that sound good? Okay. And as I said, I typically would be running this in the schema markup validator, but it looks to me like they're having a little bit of a day. And sometimes it's the other way around where schema markup validator works, but the rich results testing tool doesn't. So this one, we're seeing something very similar. I'm not going to expand it because it's very similar to what we saw before, but that's the breadcrumb issue again. When we look at products, is this the same site?
I think this is the same one.
Hold on. I think it cached me. So I'm going to do something different here. I don't know why that would cache me like that, but it did. I was like, wait a second, that looked very similar.
What are the chances?
I was like, hold on here. Okay. This thing can take a long time, which is why I don't always do it. All right, so here we are on a collection product page, so that's good. We see that we have organization data. That's what this logo is going to be for. And we have products. So let's look at this product here. As we open that up, we're missing a handful of things. One thing I didn't talk about before is this brand issue. Some folks might see these show up a lot. That is because your theme data is old, most likely, and it's using an old form where it's actually going to say that the brand is a thing instead of a brand. So that is an error on the theme side right there. The other thing that I'm noticing is you don't have description. Again, not a required field, but it could be down the road, and it's helpful to have that information within the structured data. So it's not required, but it could be. I'm seeing we're missing SKU and the product identifiers down here. So if you're using Merchant Center, you need to make sure that you get those in. Here we're missing the URL, which is going to be really important, assuming that you also have variants, but you don't. Oh, you do have variants. So all of these variants are not showing up in your structured data as they should. So in this case, you can only qualify for the one price, that $48, and the in stock, the availability. You could never qualify for a price range because you're only showing one of your variants in that list. Okay. This was really fast, and probably, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I know that there's a ton of questions and I really want to make sure that we get to those. So Kai, what questions do we have?
Oh, we have a bunch of great ones. Let's start off with this wonderful question from Sean. Sean asked, and this references something earlier on in the presentation, what would be the use case for wanting Pinterest-rich pins as opposed to driving traffic directly to the website? Or as opposed to driving directly to website?
So some people advertise on there just like they would Merchant Center, and you're advertising to Google. Especially if you're a visual brand where maybe you do have artwork or you have clothing, that's a really, or furniture is another really big case where people want to use Pinterest, because people will create their Pinterest boards, and then once they're ready to buy, they go and figure out where they want to go. So it's helpful to have your information showing all like that, because eventually people might come back to you. Now, Pinterest is a long game. If you haven't ever used it, it's a long game. So typically Pinterest, I think rewards are somewhere between 6 and 18 months. So hopefully that helps answer your question, but like that's where that becomes valuable, is if you're a visual organization where the products that you sell, people tend to want to look at and it's pretty and that sort of thing. And then or maybe they want to design something so that they're creating like a mood board, and then down the road, they decide to go purchase.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. Here's another question from Thomas B. How does Google's rich snippets / cards compare with Google My Business cards? Which is more valuable to focus on?
Google My Business versus which one would you say?
Google's rich snippets / cards. I think this is in reference to one of the earlier slides as well.
Yeah, so they're all the same thing. It's think of it like a database where you have all this information that Google has on you, and they're going to decide what piece of information they're going to share. So the Google My Business maybe has only the information that you've entered in, like because they have different things that you could enter into that system. But then maybe there's more information that you've entered into your website within the organization data that allows you to share that with Google as well. So that maybe there's something that you didn't enter into Google My Business, but you did on your website. They're going to connect all those dots and add it together. Similarly, like with reviews, think about it like that. I can't remember if there's a way for you to add your reviews to Google My Business directly, but maybe you have a tool that allows you to collect business reviews, and then it syncs into your Google My Business. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've set up one, but the Google reviews is different from like company reviews. One thing I want to emphasize though, you cannot qualify for company reviews in rich results, which is different than the reviews that'll show up in your knowledge panel for your organization. So those are two different things. Hopefully that answers that question.
Excellent. And we have a question here from Rosalie. Do you know if the Dawn Shopify theme includes structured data for products out of the box?
Yes, it does. Dawn is actually fairly good. However, because it shows you all of your variants, and it includes all of the product data that you need for rich results, but it's not going to always include, if you're doing Merchant Center, for example, it's not going to include, I believe, the SKU and GTIN. With that said, when Dawn was first released, they did not have structured data. So if you are on an old version of Dawn, when it was first announced, and maybe you're an early adopter, you will not likely have all the data that you need. With that also said, there are still a lot of people that use Dawn and that purchase JSON-LD for SEO, because it's not just the products that need that information, it's across the whole site. And that is one of those areas where they do provide article, but I don't remember if they provide the website site link search box stuff that you need. The other thing is that most themes will not have an integration with reviews. So when we talked before about needing your reviews to be included as part of your product data, I'm 99% positive the last time I checked, Dawn did not include that integration for review providers.
Wonderful answer. We have a question from, and I apologize in advance, I might butcher the name. Armin B asks, if my product description is shown on the website in an open accordion format, could that potentially be causing an issue?
For rich results, no. That's a whole nother topic around accessibility and SEO as in general. So I actually just wrote up another article recently. I recommend you check out my site. I think it was the one that I released last week about this. So I recommend that you check it out. but there is a lot of debate right now about whether or not can Google see things within an accordion or product tabs. I think that a lot of it depends on how it's coded, but in most cases, no, Google can't see that. But also you have a whole accessibility issue on whether or not it's coded properly so that someone who's using a screen reader can actually see that information as well. So that's a bigger topic. I recommend go to my website, scroll to the bottom, look at the article. It was just posted, I think, last week.
I read that article. It's a good article, so I think it'll answer a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Rosalie asks, does importing reviews during a migration get your site dinged? This was when you were speaking about, manually adding reviews and why that's not a great idea.
Yeah, so importing is different. I'm assuming you're asking the questions. Let's say you go from Shopify product reviews to Judge Me. That is different. That is an acceptable migration path. What is not typically acceptable and could get you into hot water is if you're using a drop seller site and you've taken reviews from another platform or like an Amazon platform and put them into your reviews onto your website. That is not legit and you could be at risk. So there's a difference between migrating from one review platform to another, but taking reviews from like Amazon or Etsy or from like a third party where it's sold elsewhere and adding it to your site, it's a risk that you take.
Rosalie just asked a follow-up question that you touched on, but I'm going to ask it anyways. There's a number of plugins out there that allow you to shuttle reviews from Etsy to Shopify. Would something like the Etsy store to Shopify plugin cause an issue there? Or is this kind of a to be determined grayish area?
It's a grayish area, I think, to be honest. And I don't want to advise you one way or the other because ultimately it's up to Google what they decide to do, right? Google's choice on how they handle that could change over time. I have seen people receive review-rich results when it is imported over. So that's not necessarily a major concern, as long as they can also leave a review on the site still. So if there is no method for you to, like, let's say you import your reviews from Etsy and there is no method for a new customer who's ordered from you to add a review, that could be a problem. If it's only getting the reviews from Etsy and that's the only way to get them, that's where it could be an issue. It's a gray area, to be honest, Rosalie, because a lot of it depends on Google's bots and what they accept. And then if you have a human viewer that says, that's not legit, I'm going to mark this as invalid. And you may not even realize that it's a problem because Google's not going to necessarily tell you, they just don't award you which results for the reviews. So it's a fine line. The best thing for you to do is allow people to have reviews on your site and they could add reviews to your site. And every review that you mark up has to be shown in the structured data and visually on the page. So if you import your reviews from Etsy, you have to have it visually shown on the page. Any review that you're claiming, if you have 50 reviews, there should be 50 reviews on the page.
Great clarification. I actually didn't know that. So today I learned something.
Yeah.
Crystal E asks, and this is sort of to the side, but I think relevant. What about a general review page? Does having something like that, affect anything positively or negatively?
It doesn't matter. You won't qualify for any rich results when you have a review page. It's more for information. From a user's perspective, make sure that those reviews are clickable so that if I am on that reviews page and I say, oh, I want to look at that red boots, I can go click on that review and goes to that product and I can actually see that review on the product page.
Wonderful. Farnham E asks, what was the link you shared to see site errors? I think this might be Google Search Console, but.
Was this the one you're talking about?
He asked this a bit earlier than the site domain.
Oh,
search.
you're talking about the links to be able to, these ones. No, where'd it go? I'm going to share these links too to test your results. Here we go. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'll be sharing these. Yeah.
Well, excellent. We got two more questions here. Thomas B asks, what review site or app would you recommend for embedded product reviews, which can be picked up on Google search?
embedded product reviews. I don't want to know what you mean by embedded versus just product review app. So I want to clarify that question. Look, every review app has its issue. I have a hard time recommending one over the other. There is a list of reviews that Jason LD for SEO does integrate with, but that list doesn't necessarily encapsulate my preferences. If I had to pick something, I would say you should consider Looks, Junip, Judge Me. Those are probably my 3 that I've enjoyed working with, but they all have issues, every one of them.
Let me just see here. Oh, Thomas just clarified for embedded, he mean an app that is on each product's respective page.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing. Because you're not picking a different review app for each page. So yeah, that, I guess my answer still stands.
Huzzah. And another question from Thomas B that I thought was interesting and good to answer. Do sites need visible breadcrumbs? And if not, do most regular Shopify themes include that coding on the product page?
Okay, so it's a really good question. That's not necessarily an SEO question or a rich results question. That's more of a usability. So for usability, yes, I like breadcrumbs to be visually displayed on the page, especially when you're looking at products, because sometimes people like navigate through the site and they're like, where was I again? What was I looking at? So I do think it's useful. Is it required? No, I don't think it's required.
And you just cleared the queue of questions. Well done, Alana.
All right, on time too. So I do know that, there was a lot of links in there, and I know I didn't get to a ton of them. I'm sorry. I wanted to get to more, and I probably would have spent a ton more time on them. But on the screen, I do have my email address and my website. Please feel free to email me if you would like your own structured data audit. I'm happy to take a look at it for you. That way you can see if the app could be helpful or how your theme is actually doing. Because again, as I mentioned before with Dawn, themes change over the course of time. And so maybe what your original structured data was maybe isn't as good anymore, or it was bad and now it's good. But it's important to make sure that you have a solid foundation, something that you can depend on. So I would say, email me, I'm happy to give you the free audit.
Well, excellent. No other questions are coming in, so this might be an excellent time to wrap. Yeah, thank you everybody for attending. And honestly, these were really, really good questions. And Alana, this was an amazing presentation. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to be able to share the replay with folks.
Oh, thank you. And thanks so much, Kai, for helping out. And I'm so glad everyone was able to make it. I'm excited to pick it up again next month.